All right, everybody, here I am. Alicia Munn. Dude, see, we got to do this. And welcome to the show. I'm glad you're here.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here too.
You
It took
should
us a
be.
long time to get here.
Okay. So let's get into this. First thing I want to say is that you are at this position, LPN. You're a nurse, right? And you just quit after or resigned or after 13 years.
Yeah.
So you were stable. Why'd you leave?
So healthcare New Brunswick is struggling. And I was working at a detox unit and I worked every unit in the hospital. I worked in psychiatry, detox, all the other nursing units, ER. And I just became frustrated because there's so much red tape, there's so much limitations. And it was burnout.
But now you just told me you're going to be an EA.
I am an EA.
Well, now you are. Okay. So
Yeah.
okay, then, dude. So what the F? Like, why that?
So, well, it kind of came to me. So I have been referred to as the pioneer, the FASD pioneer in New Brunswick. And I have kind of gone through a bunch of different variations coming into an FASD
Yeah, we're going to get
supportive
into it
role.
because that's just as wild too. Keep going.
So I was frustrated with my job. I've been looking at the job bank for 2 years. Safety is an issue. Staffing's an issue. There's all
Yeah.
kinds of chaos. So I had a friend of mine who actually is in the support group, and she had shared a post for this job posting, and it was at a daycare working with a one-on-one with FASD. And I was like, oh, right up my alley. I've wanted an FASD paying job. So I'm like, great. I'm like, I can do this. So I went into the daycare, I applied, and mom's like, I want her. And she knows what she's doing. She has all the tools, and I want her to work with my kid.
Oh my
So
gosh.
the
They
rest was
must have
history.
drooled when you walked in there. Well, so tell us about FASD. You like shut the door. You're like, how much time you got, right?
It was new excitement. It was euphoric. It was like, yay, I'm coming into this thing. And then I realized that it's not all cupcakes and roses in education either. And they do not have the greatest support for inclusion models. And trying to figure out like what my role is, I was more or less told that I am a unicorn, I'm an anomaly, and I do not exist anywhere across the province. So how do we make it work? And I was said, okay, so I will do what I have to do. And long story short, a lot of headbutting and not in literal
I
terms
understand.
of headbutt.
Yeah.
It's constant resistance of, what are you allowed to do? What are you not allowed to do?
Oh,
What do you
red
need for
tape,
requirements?
bureaucracy.
Right. So then it was, okay, well, I am going to my boss and I'm like, hey, I just broke the rules today. And this is why, and my kid is succeeding. So I don't know what you want to do about it. And yeah, I was done asking for permission.
Yeah.
And I started working with this young fella in August. And fast forward to now, he's had 16 different educators in the classroom. The classroom's been changed around 6 or 7 times. He's now in a second classroom because he moved from a 3 room to a 4 room, age 4. He is like annihilating life right now with milestones and development.
I can love your expression. Even when you said that about your boy. Okay. Because people are like, well, who's this cocky? I love it because when they hear why, you have every reason, my guy, to say those monikers because this comes from you have a boy,
Yep.
right? On the spectrum,
Yep.
23.
Yep.
He's the bee's knees, right?
You have no idea.
And so fill people in on what is in his life right now. And then we'll go all the way back. We'll go all the way through and you could tell us all the reasons why he's successful because you are in an envious position of a lot of parents. So, well, you have belief in yourself, but let's unpack this for folks,
Yeah,
So
for
we're going to
sure.
help them because something you could say could, lessen the learning curve, So I love it. I freaking love it. Okay. Tell us about your dude.
So my dude is 23.
Yeah.
He is amazing. He completed high school. He got his driver's license. He bought his own house that he paid $1 for. Surprise. And it is livable, functionable. And we had a team and we actually had individuals with FASD help us create his house for him. And he has an FASD home that is built and set up for him.
Yeah. So you have been through the rigor. And
I
so,
can cover it all.
but while you're saying this is where my boy is, you didn't start that way, right?
You know.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go there. Let's go there.
So
Like, take us back.
So it was a kinship adoption. And so we knew all of his history. We knew all of his family, stuff like that. He is family, a very close family member. We had relationship with that family member and we tried to support her adequately the best we could. At the end of the day, I was in grade 11 and that's when my son went into care. So fast forward, he was in and out of care, in and out of guardianship. Final guardianship was placed and he was with an amazing person who loved him unconditionally, lived in an Indigenous community. My son does not have Indigenous status. And this Indigenous woman who took him on was his oldest brother's aunt. And in that community at the time, you had to be married to adopt. She found a really good friend of hers that married her. They were not in a relationship,
Oh,
but
I know
because
what's up. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
she wanted this kid so bad and she seen the potential in this young fella. So they got married on paper and
Mm.
legalized it all and moved in together and created this life so that they could provide a family for him. Fast forward almost a year, she ended up unfortunately passing away and there was no will, there was nothing done. He wasn't legally adopted or anything like that. So he reverted back to the family because he's always kind of stayed in with family that he knew of. So my husband and I got a call from his biological mom and said, "Hey, just so you know, so and so passed away and he's gonna go stay with his grandmother for a period of time." And I looked at my husband, we were at Pizza Delight in Fredericton having dinner, and I looked at him and I'm like, "We need to do something."
It just
And that's
comes
when the
to
ball
you, right?
started.
Yeah, yeah.
So the way it started was he was originally coming to us for respite care.
Mhm.
It was not portrayed to the family that he was staying with how this was all going to go down. So we took him every other weekend. Then we took him every weekend. And then at Christmas time, so this happened she passed away in June. He came to us for respite in October. And January, I think 5th, he was placed with us permanently. They were not told that he was going to be placed with us permanently. They thought we were being kind and compassionate and doing this out of the generous of our heart to give them a break. The day that we picked him up permanently was the day that they were notified he was not coming back. And he was given the silent treatment for hours. His stuff was packed up in garbage bags. And when I picked him up, I was told that they want nothing to do with him. They were hurt. They were broken. They were devastated. They lost their daughter. Now they're losing this beautiful boy that's been in their life since he was born. Long story short, it was a nightmare. So had this beautiful baby boy who was 5, and I
Yeah.
became a parent of a 5-year-old. That's when I started parenthood. I was married for 2 years
And then just bam.
and I married my high school sweetheart.
Oh.
So this is my life. My husband and I started dating at 15 and here
So
we are today.
steady Eddie, right? And then you realized it was anything but, right?
Yeah. So he came to stay with us and the first time he walked in my house, he said, "Yo, yo, dog, what's up?" At 5 and I'm like, "Oh boy."
Yeah.
And
Things
we
seem to be.
just yeah, we just rolled with that and like we were told that he was not allowed to go to school unless he had a full-time EA. And we were told that we had to pay for it out of pocket, and we didn't have the money to do that. So we were like, well, whatever. We were fostering at the time, and it took us 5.5 years to get the adoption process. And we were technically kin. His paperwork went from the provincial social service program to an Indigenous community social service program back to the province social service program. So his files were in complete chaos, disarray, no paper clips, no staples, no nothing. I couldn't find out if he had his vaccinations to even go to school. Like everything was just chaos. So the Indigenous community that we were fostering said, "Yeah, sure, we'll give him an EA." So bam, he's in school now. Great, life is good. I'm working full time. I'm working at a vocational center with people with special needs and intellectual disabilities. And my husband's a mechanic, and life is good. And then we get a call from the school. Kid is refusing to do his work. And I'm like, "Dude, you went to school for 4 years. Like, how do you want me to get him to do
Yeah.
his
Yeah,
work?"
yeah, yeah.
So that was the start of
Of the
our spiral process.
mm,
So by the time he and his older brothers also have a diagnosis of FASD, and they're half brothers. They received a diagnosis with the 4-point system back
yeah.
from a
Uh-huh.
clinician in
Back in the
Newfoundland.
yeah, uh-huh, uh-huh.
So they got a diagnosis about 15 years before my son did. And I've always said, if it walks like a duck and it talks like a duck, it's not a cow.
That's right.
And
Amen.
so we were very fortunate that he was plugged into a play therapist from the Indigenous community that was contracted out. And she had kind of put out the term FASD.
'Cause you had never ever heard of it.
Not at this point, no. So he would have been 6 at this point, and she had so he was seeing a pediatrician, he was seeing a psychiatrist, he was seeing a psychologist, he was seeing a play therapist, he was in the foster care system, and he had attachment disorder and ADHD. Those were the diagnoses we had. So, what do you do with that? Nothing, because he's a typical boy. He's rambunctious, he's hyper, he's busy.
And then
So,
he looked normal, right?
yep.
Right? That's what throws probably sounded okay, right? Even though
Oh,
you
he
might have
articulated
heard
himself great.
right, because saying, "Yo, yo, what's up, dog?" Even if that's regurgitation, that's still stringing a sentence together at a young age. And that's part of the issue, and it's a part of the issue for society, but also as caregivers, because it F's with you, because the kid looks normal, talks normal, and then does these things. And then
So,
will look at you and
yeah.
say, "I'm sorry. I know what I did wrong. I won't do it again." And then 5 minutes later
I come from an extensive trauma background. So I have 5 generations of alcoholism in my
right,
family. So I have grown up with alcohol literally my whole life.
right,
So I was a yeller. Yelling was normal. And when I would get frustrated, when I was a kid, I used to yell and throw things. That's how I managed.
yeah,
So I can identify with a lot of these kids when they become dysregulated because it's like you just get that Hulk
mhm,
feeling and it's like, oh, I need to let it go and then I'm
yeah,
good. So I'm sitting here, a new mom to a 5-year-old, no help. Well, I have help. Yes, I shouldn't say no help. I don't know what I'm doing with the help, and the help is
right,
not getting me any further than
right.
where I am.
Still spinning your
Very
wheels.
much because they're not giving us any formal diagnosis that we can have interventions with. They're not giving us any supportive services. We had no respite care. We had nothing other than ADHD and attachment disorder. So
Understood.
looked up attachment disorder, epic nightmare, radical attachment disorder, epic nightmare of diagnosis.
Right.
And I joined a support group for kids with radical attachment disorder in Fredericton. And we kind of had some chats and stuff like that, and it was good. But I'm like, this just
It
isn't
doesn't
this
yeah.
just isn't jiving. And autism really wasn't. I kept asking the psychiatrist and the doctors, and he went through the first year he came to live with us. We had 175 doctor's appointments and professionals and all that stuff, just trying to figure out what made this kid tick. And at school, he was on 3 elementary schools by kindergarten. So he was just complacent and he liked to play. And when you didn't let him play, then he threw a fit. So we're like, how do we manage this?
So you had got to the end. We're talking about your kid but then the play therapist recognized what was going on. You heard of FASD. Who did the diagnosis?
He didn't get a diagnosis till he was 18.
That's another okay, wild. So you okay, then what did you okay, so you just
So thank God I had an amazing support system in my
yeah,
family because my mom would take him on the weekends. She went to a campground. He was outdoorsy, whatever. But there was always things that just didn't add up. Like we were trying to learn his numbers and letters and he just couldn't get it. And my husband got frustrated and he's like,
yeah,
I don't understand. Like we've been going at this. And like some days you're like your brain's there and some days it's not. Like I don't get it.
yeah,
So he got mad and he threw one of the magnetic letters across the living room floor and he's like, ah. My son ran over. He's like, T. My husband's like, stop. He's like, Alicia, look at this. He threw another letter. We went through all 26 letters in the alphabet. And as long as my kid was moving, his brain was working. So then I
right,
started researching learning styles, FASD, trauma, started all of this research. I looked
right,
up the 1970s articles because that was all that was available. I looked up
sure,
the original MRI that is
right,
extreme case. And then he was with us for 2 years. And then I decided to go back to school. And that's when I took my LPN course in 2010. And I went away to school because I was super mom and had to control everything and do everything. So now I'm going to leave it all to my husband and let him sink or swim. So I went an hour and a half outside of town to go to school.
right.
So my husband was single parenting Monday to Friday with this kid with no formal diagnosis and no supports. Got through it, managed it, came out as an LPN with honors, and
Well,
my
right
son
on,
was still
dude.
alive and my husband was still alive. It's,
And then he gets it too, right? So
for the most part,
and now when you connect, it's like Zoltron, and you guys are just a better team.
yes. And I can't do this without him. And I don't know what he would say, but I think it's
Yeah.
probably pretty mutual.
Well, yeah, yeah, uh-huh, uh-huh, it's hard. And not till he was 18. And so you were struggling with school. How did you do that?
So we came to the point where, so at this point, he had been babysitting, house sitting, dog sitting. He had a couple of jobs. Oh, and another exciting thing is he's been consecutively employed for like 6.5 years
I
with
know.
no external organization. And that's not interdependent of anything. That's him doing it like super amazing.
Where does he work?
He
Like,
works at he works at a gas station. He works at a
nice.
garbage.
Okay,
Yep.
keep going. Yeah, I can.
So I went to school, came back
Yep.
home, started working shift work, and I was like, okay, so now what? And then I ended up getting pregnant and having a baby. My daughter was planned, so I have a 12-year-old now and a
Yeah.
23-year-old. And my son is seriously like the best person ever with her. Like he would pick her up, he would love her, like he was just so great with her. And
Oh, it's awesome.
then we started to do like extracurricular activities. And we're like, okay, so we need more supports. We need more whatever. Like he's got an abundant amount of energy that doesn't turn off. He's just as busy asleep as he is awake because he doesn't sleep.
Right.
And he's picky and he's got all the sensory stuff that I had no idea was an FASD thing forever. I didn't even know what sensory stuff was
Yeah,
while he was growing up.
I got it.
So then I started working in psychiatry and we had a couple of cases with an FASD diagnosis that kind of rolled across the desk. And when I was working in psychiatry, I was the LPN that worked in the concentrated nursing area for all the complex needs: cement walls, cement floor, beds tied down,
I know, I've been to
restraints,
those places,
medications.
man.
That's where I was. And I was 8 months pregnant when I was working there. And there was a gentleman actually that I had gone to school with, and I seen that he had an FASD diagnosis. I went to elementary school with this person. And then I started thinking, and I looked at him in his childhood, and I looked at the social life and the academics and all of this stuff. And he was very, very high level on the spectrum, significant impairments, functional. And at this point, he had a person that he was in a relationship with, and he had children. And it just kinda, like, alarms went off, and then
Yeah,
that's when I started, "Okay, this is," and then I started intense research, intense reading, read Bonnie Buxton's book, Damaged Angels, and that
yeah,
was my first introduction. I'm like, "This is it," and I'm like, "My kid is not gonna be like this. Like,
yeah,
my kid is not. I'm going to do whatever I have to do, and I don't care what it takes." So
right,
then fast forward, I'm working in a different facility as an LPN again, and I get a call from the school. They're quite concerned about my son,
right.
and they seen it on a journal page, a suicide plan. So then it was, okay, now, well, what do we do with this? Because he's been in counseling, he's been in therapy,
Yeah,
it's not helpful. He can't do anything with an hour-long session. And one of the counselors actually told him that I was a problem right in front of him. So my credibility's gone out the window to my teenage kid. But anyway, we've had an excellent relationship.
and you
He
wanted
trusts
to
me.
be like,
I
and
want to
it took
throttle
me,
you.
you wanted to say, and anyway, it took me all I had to not, smash people in the face, right? Okay, let me back you up. You said, I didn't want that situation. And the situation I know is you're talking about Bonnie's daughter, Colette. And I know, like, the scene you're describing, meeting her in McDonald's,
Yep.
the
Homelessness, the
mom, the
drug
homeless,
addiction,
yeah,
the criminal
all that
activity.
stuff, right? We have the whole episode. Yeah, anyways, and she's cool beans now. So you weren't saying as disdain, you were like, I could only imagine. I don't want to even, and I'm going to do what it takes.
I have, like I had said before, I come from a life of drug and addiction, but
Yeah,
I had a stellar mom who never gave up on people, always seen the best in everybody.
right.
My dad got 21 years sobriety in. One of my stepfathers unfortunately passed away. And my other stepfather, he's got 9 years recovery in, and he's a peer support worker with a housing company
Awesome.
organization with John Howard.
So here's my question. What does it take? What does it take? Like, I know it's loaded, but how do they get there? Like, moms are listening saying, like, give me the goods because they're
So
experiencing what you've experienced and they want that outcome.
so honestly, the game changer for me was obviously not when I got the diagnosis, because he was 18 when he got the diagnosis. The
Mhm.
game changer was with me was when I was trained in a gentle persuasive approach training module for dementia care. And I started making the correlations between dementia and our children with brain based disabilities. And the gentle persuasive approach started with, you need to change your perception, you need to lower your expectations. Every behavior is a response to an unmet need.
Right.
you have to look beyond what you're seeing and figuring out what the contributing factor is. And a lot of people thought it was a lot of hogwash, and a lot of people were like, "Meh, whatever." I have worked in vocations for 4 years. I was never injured, knock on wood. I worked in the hospital setting, and I volunteered to take the complex, difficult patients, and I floated for 7.5 years. So wherever there was a sick call, that's where I went, and I opted to take the most difficult patients, and I was never injured by a patient in 13.5 years. And I have lived a life of chaos, and I never got hurt in a situation. Not because I'm pompous, not because I'm better than anyone else, not because I have any strategies, but because I used my head and I thought about it. And I came from a place of compassion and empathy and what is going on in their mind, what is going on in their heart. And when I started doing that, everything shifted. And I know that you just had your master class for anger and aggression, and the stuff in there is beyond amazing. And
Oh,
it confirms everything that I took. And then my husband and I, we started a support group because when my son got diagnosed, there was nothing after diagnosis like most families live with.
yeah,
So with like, so then we start this support group, and then we start having a summer camp, and we start having family support
because you
days.
start to see that you're not the only one dealing.
Well, I learned that what I was implementing and what I was doing was working, and it wasn't just with my own kid. And that's where my pivotal shift said, like, okay, if this is working with seniors and this is working with people with brain based disabilities and this is working with developmental diagnosis, then this works. It like, and like you've said, it's brain first. You have to look this, my kid is not choosing to do this. I don't know how many times I have said, "Oh, he just needs to use an agenda. Oh, he just needs to use timers. Oh," and the saga that we all hear. It's not that. It's like, my son didn't have a technology accommodation. We're in the 21st century.
Yeah.
Like, crap. So when we were struggling, again, I read that book with Bonnie Buxton, and I had this information saying that he was suicidal and he had a plan. And I was like, okay, so now what? So then I start pulling in my community. I start pulling like who has a connection to my son? Who does my son look up to? Who does he think is the cat's meow? Who like and I'm bringing these people. I'm begging. I'm calling, and I'm like, and
That's
it's interesting.
important. Keep
Yeah,
stop there. So, because you're telling the right things, because you're how are you able to set aside pride? How are you able to, because also want to ask, clearly you've been in some high pressure situations in terms of some amygdala, you gotta navigate that in your work. What made you successful, do you think? Like, was it your tone when you started? You could tell someone was getting agitated. You went right to empathy, and that's where you went?
empathy was my big place. The other thing too is I remember when I was doing a clinical rotation at a hospital and I had a stroke patient. And this also got me because my son was still in my care and stuff at this time. And I'm thinking, like, how does his brain work? Like, I don't get this. And this patient could not talk because the stroke that they had, the part of their brain that was damaged by the hemorrhagic stroke, wasn't working anymore. So, but they could swear. So this is an adult who has had a life of experiences, and they cannot talk. They can't talk to their loved ones. They can't say words. They can't formalize anything that they need. And they're not even making unsensible, like words that are not making sense in a sentence. They were making incomprehensible sounds. And then I would try to figure out what they needed. And they're like, ah, shit. And I'm like, you just talked.
So that if you said that, that means you're pulling one over on me.
So, well, no, it wasn't that because all the medical documentation, this is a patient in the hospital, in the intense ICU in the neuro unit at a huge hospital in our community. And I'm like, okay, so that said,
So they never said, okay, he's mute, but he could swear.
yes. So he would be like, he'd be like,
Yeah.
and then he'd say, ah, shit.
Yeah, because it comes from a different part of the brain. Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
Exactly.
So this is
When,
what you were like having to put together.
yes. So I'm like, so then to create further success with my son, I had to tap into which part of his brain worked. So my son is extremely empathetic to the point that he would stand in front of a truck to save somebody and take his own life.
Right, right, right.
And that's not an exaggeration. So an example of he moved into his own home, massive snowstorm. We told him he needs to keep his yard cleaned. We told him all of this stuff because if something ever happened that the ambulance needed to come, they had to be able to get a gurney to
Yeah.
his house to help him. And we always had to use catastrophic measures for explanation for him
Sure.
because if it was anything other, then it
It's
was
too
just meh.
nuanced, too nuanced. Yeah,
Right.
you just had to let him know the scale,
Yes.
right? Yeah, yeah. Okay.
And that was the way we made things
Yeah. Cool, that
tangible in
made
his
sense to
world.
him. Yep, that's awesome.
So we had this epic storm, and he literally walked out in sneakers and a hoodie, which is classic of a lot of
Yeah, yeah.
our teens and
Uh-huh.
adults. And he went across the street to the elderly lady that lived across the street. He cleaned off her car, he shoveled her driveway, and then he walked back into his house and he stayed in his house.
Well, 'cause to make sure the gurney had to get in there in case she had trouble.
Right. But his driveway wasn't cleaned off, his
Yeah,
car wasn't cleaned off, and his sidewalk wasn't shoveled.
yeah.
Because in his mind, that doesn't register to him.
Yeah, that's insight, right?
Yep.
Yeah, because he can see it's concrete,
That's right.
but to put that emphasis on him. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, and because that's executive functioning, right?
Yep.
If they
And
could
once
see it,
we
they could do it. It's the
right.
internal condition and organization and acquisition of different parts of the brain that they struggle.
And trying to learn all of this with no diagnosis and no concrete explanation that this is what it is other than my own personal research.
How'd you feel after the diagnose? Like 18? Okay, how'd you feel? How'd he feel?
I don't know if he really got it because his life, I don't know if he realizes how much his life
Because he was like,
changed
okay.
or
Was he just
didn't
like,
change.
yeah, yeah, okay.
He was just like, okay, so now what? And when I got the diagnosis, another game changer was I said to the individuals from the Center of Excellence in Moncton that did his diagnosis, I said, so what can he not do? Because at this point, I'm very well educated, very well versed in
Yeah,
FASD.
yeah.
If there was a piece of material out there, I've literally
Yeah,
read
yeah.
it.
Your parents are FBI agents, man.
We're
If
the
I ever say,
professionals,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
We're
Oh,
the
yeah.
only diagnosis that
Yeah,
we're the
yeah.
professionals in their
Uh-huh.
disease or their, or not disease, but their
I know.
diagnosis process.
Uh-huh.
So I was like, okay, so what can he not do? And they said, there's nothing he can't do. I said, all right, good enough. And I said, give me some examples of people that have this diagnosis in the province and what are they doing for careers? Well, there's a news reporter, there's an RCMP officer. I'm like, great. My kid can walk and talk and wipe his own butt. We're golden. He can be
Yeah,
whatever he needs to be.
right.
And when I was 24, I was diagnosed with ADHD and learning disabilities, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, and dyslexia. So I can appreciate a lot of his challenges and struggles that
Yeah, you could see a little, yeah, yeah, a
the
little bit.
frustration. And then I could see the symptoms that were coming from the frustration of the systematic
Because
processing.
growing up, you would get in shit, but not enough to get kicked out. Like not enough where the consequences were dire, right?
Well, I was never behavioral.
Yeah, right, right.
I was doing academics for 5.5 hours in elementary school after
Yeah, yeah.
school. Like that's just the way I
Yeah,
was.
yeah,
And
yeah.
because I was studious and conscientious, I got
Yeah.
E for effort.
Yeah, yeah.
And he
You
didn't
weren't.
get that.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. So, but you
So,
had a door in because you could say, like, I get not being able to focus. I get those things.
but I didn't until I went to my nursing school. So again, this was all like trial and error, trial and error, trial and error. So I researched learning styles. I looked up other strategies that families were using. I would look up different symptoms that he was experiencing. And I'm like, okay, so I would type that. And I still do this every day because the
Yeah.
information is still ever evolving.
It is, and it's awesome.
And that's how I learned that when my son wasn't learning his letters and we threw the letter across the living room and he picked it up. Okay. So what are the learning styles? So I learned that he's a kinesthetic learner. Did an OT tell me that? No. Do people know what kinesthetic learning is? Some do.
Some do, yeah.
But we learned how to read by drawing his feet and scattering them along the floor and calling the words out to the point that I would rearrange them so he couldn't even memorize them. He knew they were there and he knew what wasn't there. And I'd throw in random words and he'd like, haha, that one's not there. So it was constantly adapting and constantly adapting. And then I got to the point where I didn't want him to be a victim of society. And I didn't want him to fall to social determinants of health. And I didn't want him to be classified in that vulnerable population, even though I knew that he was vulnerable. There was a lot of situations that happened that could have become very bad very quickly, talking to people and saying things that he shouldn't have because he thought that he was this strong and this big and life was
Yep.
great.
Yep. Mhm.
And then learning that the people that he's talking to have criminal records for assault and battery and have been in jail. And then I'm worried, are my tires going to get slashed? And am I going to have a drive by? Like, I don't live
Mhm.
in the Bronx or the hood or a dangerous neighborhood, but these were, I don't live naive either. And that
Right.
was another
Yeah.
thing is I looked at every situation and I would be like, okay, what's the worst possible outcome with this? And what can I do to safeguard? And that's another thing that we did was safeguard a lot.
Wow, okay, and, like, he's 18, he's like, did it ever come up, like, even 18 to 23 about FASD? Like, where is he now? Like, he's doing all these cool things, but in terms of, like, his development, because it takes longer and looks
Yep.
different, but where is he, like, now? Is
I'd say he's probably about 15 or 16,
Yeah.
maybe pushing even into 17 now. Like most people with FASD, depending on what you're looking at,
Uh-huh,
he's all over the place.
uh-huh.
But he spirals just as fast as anybody else does with that diagnosis. He is a 10-second kid in a 30-second world,
Yeah, yeah, man.
and he goes 0 to 60 flat. So, an example of that is his house will be spotless. He has home support that comes in for 20 hours a week. They help him clean. That's all they do because that's all they're capable of. Oh, and he's had 20 home support workers and he's not behavioral, extreme behaviors, I should
Right.
say.
How did you convince people to do that?
How did I convince
Like,
care
to
workers to
how
do it?
to like, did he just are these supports available to people
So,
with
so,
FASD?
so when, yes and no. No.
Right. Like, where is this magic?
This magic is creative wording.
Yeah. It's
So
you, right? Like, so how did you finagle that stuff?
so when he was 18, I had called the Center of Excellence and I said, "Joseph is gonna be 19, and when he's 19, I lose him. You need to do something, and we need to figure this out. Where is he on the wait list?"
There we go. This is where I wanted to go back to where you're being vulnerable, mama. Okay.
And
And
I'm like a
you
barracuda with a
said you
bone.
called people. This is where I wanted to jump back in. And you were calling and you were saying your story, right? You were just like, I need help.
Back, I think it was 17 or 18 years ago, there's an organization, Victoria Road Drip Nurses, and they used to do the diagnostic clinics.
Right.
They went bankrupt, and the Center of Excellence at that time of what it was and in its existence dissolved.
Right.
And then Dr. Nicole LeBlanc from Vitality and the Center of Excellence in Moncton
Right.
really seen, I think she was with VON a little bit as well, but she really seen that this was a thing, that it needs attention and that people need diagnosis and support and families are struggling. So the Center of Excellence became reopened under Vitality, which is one of our health authorities. We have two health authorities in New Brunswick. We have
Right.
Vitality and Horizon. And Vitality was they were supposed to have received the wait list from VON. I had did the application form, I had submitted everything needed, all of that stuff. And a social worker messaged me, oh gosh, I don't know, 10, well, it'd be a long time ago. I have no concept of time. Anyway, a long time ago,
Yeah.
a
I
social
still
worker
think
said,
you think something's 10 years ago
ugh,
and they're like, it was
20,
95. And you're like,
right?
oh shit. Yeah.
So the social worker messaged me. She said, "Yep, we got your application. He's on the wait list. Blah blah blah. Here is some information in the meantime about FASD and executive function. Have a fun read. We'll message you when he's available." And that's all I heard. And they said it was a 5-year wait list at that time. So I was like, I didn't pursue it. I didn't look into it anymore. I didn't knock on the doors because I was going by the timeline they gave me. So I didn't need to. And then, like I said, fast forward, he's 18, he's going to be 19, he's graduating from high school, he's struggling in his courses, and I'm going to lose him because he's going to be 19 and nobody can talk to me about anything financially, medically, anything. And I'm literally sending a 12-year-old out in the world on his own, like our
You
parents
see,
do.
because you got it. And so lots of the parents find out after, then they learn you knew already.
I knew. So I had a meeting. I called the Center of Excellence, and that's when I reached out and I said, "Where is he on the wait list?" I said, "I'm going to lose my kid. You need to help me figure this out." They said, "Oh, we don't have his name on the wait list." And I'm like, "You've got to be kidding me. You guys have a 7-year wait list right now, and he's not even on the wait list." And they said, "Well, and we only diagnosed to age 18." And I'm like, "You've got to be kidding me." So they diagnose school age to age 18. And then after that, there's nobody in the province that can diagnose. And I know that my kid has this and I'm pushing and I'm pushing. So we expedited stuff because we knew that there was a confirmation of alcohol exposure. Mom had told me years ago that there was some consumption there. And then expedited the process as fast as we could, and we ended up getting in because I had previous documents stating that we were enrolled with VON. And that's the only reason why we got in. If I didn't have those documents, he would still have no diagnosis. And so we got the diagnosis. It was a 4-day assessment at the Center of Excellence in Moncton, which is 2 hours away from my home. We had to stay in a hotel. Thankfully, he was not a little toddler because it would have been epically a mess to
Yeah,
get that
man.
diagnosis. And the assessments were 4 hours a day if he could make it that long. So, and all of the assessments were at different spots because Vitalite uses the health authority specialists of OT and speech and psychology. So they all kind of, whenever their clinics are available for hours, that's when they get. And that's one of the contributing things to why the diagnosis takes so long in New Brunswick, because that clinic doesn't have all of their ducks in the same house. They have to go out and seek. We do have another private organization, Balanced Psychology, who has individuals that they've contracted out, but they do all the services there in their building.
Right.
So again, fast forward, meeting with the school. He needs to graduate. He's not passing. I'm getting emails saying I sent him a letter or I gave him a document. He doesn't have it. I'm like, oh, that went through the wash because it was crumpled up in his pocket. If you need him to do projects, you need to email me because if not, they're not going to get done because this is the way his brain works. He needs a scribe. Well, we can't do that because he doesn't have an IEP. I said, he needs this. No, we can't do that either. I'm like, holy frig. This kid is graduating. We're
I
setting him up for
know.
the world
I
and
know.
you can't do anything. So I brought in my community liaison, Lisa Taylor from the MBF FASD Center of Excellence, who has been my everything since on this FASD journey. And we went into the school and we're like, okay, this is how it is. I had a meeting with the principal and he said, I'm sorry that your son has fallen through the cracks. He is not on our behavior list. So therefore he is falling through the cracks. And I looked at him and I more or less said, I don't care what has happened before this moment I'm talking to you. He needs to graduate, period. He needs to have his diploma and he's not on any modified programs. He's not on any accommodations of extensive sort or anything. He's got like extra time and he can go to a quiet place. That's about it. And he can have a question read to him out loud if he needs it. That was the extent of his IEP, literally copy and pasted from grade 1. So we go into the meeting and we have the VP, Lisa from the Center of Excellence, myself, Joseph was there, all of his teachers, and the methods and resource teacher. And one of his teachers looked at me and she's like, I don't know what you expect about it. I'm not giving him a free pass. So if he wants to pass and graduate, then he needs to do the work. And I blew my gasket.
Where
I
and
said, uh, I said, I don't care if you have to give him 45 pages of 1+1. He will do the work and you will pass him. And that's where it was at. And then we finally got everything. We finally communicated. It was back and forth for weeks.
uh-huh.
This was the second half of the school year. So moving forward, we get that. Then we set him up with a vocational program to help with employment transition. That didn't work. They didn't show up to the meetings. They didn't show up to the appointments.
Right,
And
right, right.
they never checked in. So I was like, okay, great. So then I became his career counselor. So then I was like, at this point, he's 18. I don't even know if he can still live on his own. I don't even, because my husband and I've talked about that too. We're like, what are we going to do if he has to live with us forever?
Right.
Are we ready for this? Like, is this what we want? Like, can we? So anyway, an interesting situation came up on Kijiji that was looking for a house sitter. And I replied back and I asked what the requirements were. And I signed my son up for a 2-month house sitting project that he had to pay to house sit. He had to pay to house sit
Why?
because they
That's
were
what you
giving him rent free, but he had to pay the utilities. So he had to pay for heat and internet.
okay.
And he epically failed. It was a nightmare, but it was a nightmare for a lot of reasons because COVID hit, we went rent. The people that lived in the house was an immigration. So they were in a different country and COVID locked down the world. So they couldn't even come back. So his 2-month house sitting project turned into a year house sitting project. And my 19-year-old son, who is now legally aged to drink, is bacheloring it in this split level entry house that is fully furnished and they had a dog and chickens. So because I'm an insane person, I've concluded that.
Mhm.
I said it's literally 7 minutes down the road from my house. They need somebody going in, flipping lights on and off, whatever. I can do that. If he can't manage this, I can go in and help him
Yeah,
move out.
that's because that's what happens. You have to rectify that it might be you doing the job. When
Yep.
you are registering, signing up, listen, man,
Yep.
I got my guy a job at Eastside Mario's washing dishes.
Yep.
I was washing dishes at the
Yep.
end. Yeah. So, you know what I'm saying?
Oh
So
yes.
yes, you reconciled that in your head because then you're less, not like it's you're changing expectation. Because if you were to put on that he has to you said no, there's a chance because brain, because, and all environment, all that this might not, but then at the end of the day, I could do it.
I had to know because the Center of Excellence told me that he can do anything everybody can if he's supported.
Yeah.
And we got a beautiful 40-page document of all the recommendations
Yeah.
that we're taking out to the community. And the community, like,
We can't do this.
I don't know anything about this.
Uh-huh.
Or, yeah, sure, we'll do ABA and we'll do all of this stuff with your kid. And it's not working. And it's
Mhm.
like, so anything I did, I always set him up that he would have the opportunity to succeed. And if he couldn't, then I could help buffer in
Yeah.
between.
That's right.
And that's the other thing. That was the other contributing factor. So he went into this house, and let me tell you, I stayed away for a day, and then we went and cleaned it. We put up visual cues. We had an OT come in and set up this and that and talk to him about everything, whatever. And when he graduated, our social development department, our social services has a disability support services section. So we filled out the paperwork for that. And the social worker called me back because I'm like, well, he needs something because we don't even know what he can and can't do. And at this time, like I said, he was operating between maybe 9, 10, maybe 13, some days pushing it, which is old enough to babysit and old enough to cook in the microwave and stuff. So I was like, he'll be fine. So the social worker from the disability support program called me up and she said, so we got your son's application. I said, great. She said, yeah, I think we can help. I said, great. She said, he needs a mentor and he needs some life skills classes.
I know.
My response was, which ones do you want him to retake?
Oh, yeah, it's a good one. That's a good
And
one.
she said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, he's taken this one and this one and this one. Plus he's got his babysitting course and his first aid and a CPR and this and this and
Mhm.
this. And she's like, oh, I said, he has no problems understanding the information. It's disconnect is when he has to put that into practice. And
Mhm.
she's like,
Mhm.
well, I don't understand what you mean. So we gave some scenarios and she's like, oh, I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah. I said, he'll take his car key and he'll dangle it in between a handle on the door of his cupboard where his cups are. And then he'll ransack his whole house like a tornado went through it, trying to find his key for his car because he's got to go to work because his reptile brain is firing and
Oh,
his amygdala
yeah,
is
yeah. Once
firing
the executive functioning
and it's
fails.
done. It's gone.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt.
So then they said, well, what do you need? And I said, well, we need this and we need this and we need this. Oh, well, we can't do all of it. I said, well, what can you do?
Yeah.
So then there was personal support organization that does like for geriatrics and stuff. They do like the cooking and the cleaning and the bathing and stuff like that. And I'm like, well, it'd be perfect world. I'd love it if you could bath him and brush his teeth for me because that would be great. But good luck
Yeah.
because he's a fully able individual. So they said, well, maybe we'll send in some home support services for companionship and for to help him manage the house. That's when it started. We went from 1 to 20 and it was medication reminders. Oh, well, we can't tell him that he has to take his meds.
Oh,
And I said,
yeah, or
okay,
we have to tell them the truth, and I know, like, we have to tell them everything.
right.
I got, such good schooling on that. I was taking that course at the Children's Aid, and we had a social worker, and, Donna was saying, like he's like, "I have to be upfront and tell everything to my clients," and she's like, "You are overwhelming her," and she probably has no idea what you're saying, and so something like came up, and then he was like, "Well, I could call her," I would just have to tell her I was in a meeting because he was like, "Again, I have to." "Okay, no problem," she says. So she calls and he explains all the thing, and her response was, "So do I get my kids back?" And Donna was like, what I'm saying? Like, saw it and he was just like, "Oh." because when you submit to that, because we always want to think the best and independence, and that's where social work and these services try to push people, but they don't understand the interdependence of it.
Independence is not possible for a long, long time, if at all, with FASD.
Yeah, because
And
of the areas that are
that's
impacted.
right. It's brain damage. Like I've
Yes.
I've worked with traumatic brain injuries in the hospital, and you see it, and it's, you just you see it, and
But they look normal and talk normal.
that's right.
That's what's up, right?
And
So,
you gotta love it too when you talk to someone and you're like, "Well, would you let a paraplegic come in here without their wheelchair?" "Well, don't be so ridiculous."
well,
Well,
you're being ridiculous, right? But
this
it's
is the way
so
it
the human race has been brought up to believe if you look normal, you talk normal, you function normal, right? I have a question for you.
Yeah.
How did you, because you were saying my boy does this, has this, did this, and I know there's a long time in between when you're saying those. How did you get him to buy into that? Because here
That's
comes
the
the
thing.
okay, see, that's
So,
right. The
another
crack
strategy.
interviewer here.
What's that?
I said, "That's me." I'm asking all the because that's what my parents are thinking. Like,
Yeah.
I know for sure. Like, how'd you get them to buy in? Because they'll say my kiddo wants nothing to do with that when I
So
offer to help.
so I have, because I wear lots of hats, I have a support group that I run as well.
Yeah,
I have the Fredericton FASD support group that
yeah.
we established.
Plug it.
Fredericton FASD support group.
Great. Like on Facebook.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
So when I started that group, a lot of parents coming to me about the same stuff, same concerns I had, same concerns Bonnie had, same
Right.
concerns that this is what our reality is that we live with.
Yeah.
And I have said to parents, when they trust their friends more than they trust you, you've lost them, because nothing you say is credible anymore. You're just a stuffy parent. You're helicopter parenting. You're crowding them.
Yeah,
You're smothering
you're the
them.
cause of overwhelm because there's no conversation. It's just the relaying of what they should be doing or what they're not doing.
Yep. I've talked to parents too, and I said there's almost a pivotal shift that you go from their parent to pretending to be their best friend. And when you can make that pivotal shift, then they stay with you because they trust you. But the other thing, the behind the scenes, again, that we've talked about is what it takes for him to be successful. What does it take for him to live on his own for 3 years? So my son calls me and he says, "Hey, my ex girlfriend's dad is selling her house for $1, a mini home in a trailer park for $1." I'm like, "No."
Right. Oh, there's a confabulation like coming right out of left field.
Well,
Okay.
that's what I thought.
Yeah, you heard something wrong. Something. Yeah, yeah.
So I called, said, "Parent, yeah, I'm selling it for $1. So this is legit. Yep. He just has to pay the lawyer fees to change the title." Okay. So it's not $1 anymore now. It's 500 plus $1, but the house itself was $1. The individuals were still living in this house. When they moved out, they fell through the floor. There was black mold all
Right.
through the house. It was rotten. The only reason why he was selling it to my son was because it would have cost him more to renovate it to sell it or
Right.
to have it removed for scrap metal. So my
You just
son,
wanted rid of it. Yeah.
he's like, $1? I have a house. Great.
Yeah. That's a good value prop.
Yeah. And we went in it. And my husband and I, thank goodness, he is an amazing man that is very talented
Yeah.
and jack of all trades.
Yeah. Because I would have been looking at you like, I don't want to.
We gutted it to the Joyces. We ripped all the walls out. We changed the layout. We changed the plumbing. We changed the electrical. We changed the heat source. We changed everything. And we set it up that it was an FASD home. We had an OT come in, and there is nothing that is important below his waist in that house. There's no
Uh,
closets. There's no dressers.
see,
So
I don't even. It's so unique though, Alicia. So how do we get parents past the yeah, but I can't do that? It's like,
I've
look what you got. Look what you
I've always been that person too that if you're gonna tell me no, you're gonna tell me why. And that's the way I've always been. I challenge, and I said to you, Jeff, that I am a unicorn with a dash of Wonder Woman, but I missed the touch of spice.
yeah, yeah.
And I can be quite spicy sometimes. And it's like, if you're gonna tell me no, you gotta tell me why. And not only do you have to tell me why, but it's gotta make sense to me. And if it doesn't make sense to me, I'm gonna keep asking and I'm gonna keep
Yeah, because it does
questioning
it's
and I'm
not
gonna keep
logical.
exploring.
I run up against that too, and then they give you some layman reason, and you're like, "Well, that just well, can't we just break the rule?" That
right?
was Donna's thing. She's like, rules are meant to be broken. That's what she meant.
Right. And
Yeah.
that's what I've learned since then. It's rules are in place until they're no longer rules and then they're accommodated somehow.
Yeah. Until they're
And
modified.
yes, so we had an OT come into the home. Did the OT set up the house?
Yeah. Yeah. This girl.
So we took 6.5 months of renovating. We fronted the bill for the renovations. We were very generous, and this is where our community comes in. My mom had a stand up shower that she bought that she wasn't using, so she gave
Oh,
it to my
yeah.
son.
Yeah. Boy.
We
You're,
had building
mm,
materials
you're
from our cottage,
resourceful.
so we started using our resources. And because I
Mhm.
have an FASD support group and I knew that strengths based approach is so crucial, I had a young man who loved doing renovations.
Yeah.
So he came in to help rip out insulation.
Yeah.
And I had another young man who also had
Yeah.
FASD and
Because
he
why
was
not?
helping paint and
Because
crack
why
seal.
not?
So this is legitimately from the trusses to the roof, an FASD home. We had people with FASD diagnosed, helping build it. We have FASD individuals with diagnosis living in it. We have
More people need to know this. I'm glad.
it's it's incredible. And so then it was, how do we sustain this? So it was, I
Hmm.
was stopping in and calling. How are you doing? Great. If I get up great really quick, it wasn't great.
You know it. You know it. Everything's fine. Yeah.
Right.
Right. See
Yeah.
you in a minute.
But
Yeah.
because we did the house sitting project, I knew what he was going to struggle with. If he can't see it, it doesn't exist. So if he is sitting in his living room in a lazy boy chair and the garbage can is in the kitchen, where's his garbage going to go?
Beside him.
Right. So we're literally wading through garbage.
Because then it looks like then they're hoarding and then they're being lazy. But you're like, that's not it. He
Yep.
needs a garbage beside him.
Yep. So we put garbages in every room
Yeah.
beside the chair that he decided he wanted to sit in.
Okay. So you are saying what's important, controlled autonomy.
Yes. The
Yeah.
other thing is when we set up where his food and items in his kitchen were going to go, I said to him, this was before we even finished the layout of the kitchen. I said, I want you to make me some spaghetti. And he looked at me and he's like, I have no stove and I have no power. Like, how can I make you spaghetti? And I'm like, I want you to go reach for where you would go for a pot. Where would you go to grab your spaghetti pasta? Where would you go to grab the spaghetti sauce? And based on his automatic impulse of where he would go is where we put the food. My brain,
Guy,
yeah,
I'm going to steal that.
yeah,
And by not steal, I give credit, but like, I'm going to say that story. I might even
yes.
print this clip. Jeez Louise.
And
Because
then,
that's where his brain would naturally go. So instead of putting it and training the brain, where would you, dude? Hmm. That's
and I have actually done that
brilliant.
with several other individuals
Good
when
God.
setting up homes, because I've actually set up a couple of FASD homes. And we've done the same process. Now, another thing that a lot of people take for granted.
Give it all of the things. Okay.
So I had an individual that came to live with me for 3 years. He was in a crisis. And then anyway, long story short, we managed to get him housing. And he's in an interdependent program with an organization that he has support coming in to help him.
Hmm.
And I provided training to the organization of brain based approach, first person centered, and all of this stuff, and strength based, learning our strategies and our keys and all of that stuff that we need. And we got him an apartment that had one kitchen sink. So I talked to his mom, and she always had two kitchen sinks. I had two kitchen sinks. This individual struggled how he was going to do the dishes
Yeah. Like
because he had no countertop on one side of the sink and he only had one sink.
kind
So
of
he
brain. Yeah.
couldn't figure out how to do the dishes because you rinse your dishes off, you have your water, and then you
Mental
rinse them off
flexibility,
again.
executive functioning deficit.
Gone. So I'm like, this was the thing. And then we had another situation that he was accused of smoking cannabis in his apartment. Well, that's a big red flag if you're a renter.
Hmm. Yeah.
So the housing organization facilitator said to me, I'm concerned because he's smoking cannabis in his apartment. So Barracuda goes in and I'm like, hey, are you smoking weed in your apartment? Because you're going to get kicked out and you're going to be on the streets because you can't come
Yeah.
back and live with me because you want to do this. This is your dream. And that's the other thing too. I find out what they want and I play that back to them.
Yeah. Well,
You told me you wanted a house. I got you a house.
right.
You need to take care of this. So what are we going to do? How are we going to make this work?
Do you know it's not when to the outside that would seem abrasive.
Yep.
The FASD brain, you're being direct.
Very much.
You're just saying it, and that way he doesn't have to wade through nuance.
Nope.
And what is it? Like, I know exactly what my mom is saying, and you need to tell him stuff to get that arousal, because then it gets the brain going, right?
Well,
And
because then it's because his emotion is intact. He's
yeah,
very empathetic.
yeah.
So I have to get a rise that
Yeah,
just
you have
like
to
that
play
stroke
to that,
patient,
like, yeah,
I
how do you
had to,
think you'll feel? This is you're gonna feel like this. I don't wanna feel like that. Yeah, that's smart, smart. I
and
guess because every kid's different. Yeah, uh-huh.
yep, but a lot of our children, when you look at their strengths, they're compassionate, they're resilient, they're
They wanna
empathetic, they're good
help,
with,
they
they
wanna
want to help.
contribute,
Yes, they
yes,
want a purpose.
just like us.
Yep. And that's so all of those things are how he is successful now. But also, before I knew about expectations and before I knew about all of this growth and development and different age appropriate for
Mhm.
different parts of the brain, my son made a comment to me and it stuck. And it was, I always told him that I wanted him to be successful. And he said to me, I will never be able to be successful in your eyes because I can't measure up to your expectations. And that was a kicker.
Good. Yeah, right.
But he didn't know what my expectations were. He just knew I was a hard ass. He knew that I had a life and I had a home and I had a career. And, but he didn't know that all I wanted for him to do was the best that he could do. That was
Yeah,
my
like, what
idea of
does that
success.
mean? That's a
Like that,
ambiguous, right?
that's right. And that's abstract. And it's not a tangible concept that he can grasp. So he was looking at my life or whatever he was paralleling my level of success that he thought. And that was another contributing factor for him. And it's, like I can give a million and one situations. Again, when we had that young fellow that was living with us for 3 years, he stole one of my husband's customers' cars.
It
Did I
always
call the
this
cops?
right.
Nope.
No, I don't
Did
mean to
I?
cuss, but I just picture your husband, like, I always picture the, "Oh my god, oh my gosh," but then I picture, "Alright, well, what do we do?" Like,
My
that's what
husband's
it
like,
comes.
my husband's like, Alicia, I'll come with him to with a crazy idea. And he's like, I don't even care. Just,
Yeah.
just do whatever
Yeah,
because you
because
make
it
it work.
works, right? Like, so and he's like, "Okay,
Yeah.
what role am I playing? No problem." Tara and I got really good at that. I'd go pick up Tara from work. This is the way he is. This is
Yep.
how I need you to talk. Because sometimes she'd be dysregulated from work, so I'd be like, "I need you in this space, so what do we need to do?" And then if you had a hard day at work and she just vent, like,
Yep.
"Get it all out, get it," "because I need you to be like this. Because if you're going home dysregulated, that's the one thing. You work it and then you go home to it,
Yep. And you're in
right?
it all the time, right?
Okay, well, when you're ready to transition, I want to know, like, how did you maintain sane?
Yep.
Honestly, like, what did you? Because it's not saying like you're always, you could do this half manic and ADHD, perseveration, hyperfocus, all that stuff. But in those moments, because there's those hard moments, right?
Yep.
You're tired. And how did you do it? Like, what do you do?
I just do it. And that's a common answer that I get from parents. When you come from a trauma background, I never considered myself having a trauma background.
Yeah, I
I
know.
never I never considered that was just my life. My mom married 3 different alcoholics,
Yeah, yeah.
and
Both
it
my
wasn't
sisters, yeah, yeah.
and my mom was never an alcoholic. My mom had the heart size of Texas and seeing the good in everybody.
That's almost to the detriment, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, yes, it came at a price, and that price was that fairy tale childhood. But at the
It's
same time, if I didn't go through that, I wouldn't have
I
the level
agree.
of empathy.
I
Like I wouldn't.
agree with you. My mom was a lib. Like, she, as always saw like that. And even when I lived in the city, my sister, her friends, well, birds of a feather, right? And so I would go into my parents' apartment and, my sister would be there, but then these giant dudes. And then, but my mom, and they called her Nana.
Yep.
and they were sweet. They had things too, right? Because when I would go out into society with them, I could clearly see where there was, but they were lovely, shirt off the back. My sister would be like that too, right?
The level of
She'd
when
fight
you
the
obtain
person and
respect,
then yeah, yeah. But
it
so that's the same. Like I can identify with that. Now, were there things going on in my house when I was being raised that you're like, but right?
yeah, absolutely.
So that's where that background comes from. But you're spot on. So, but for your own relaxation, like what do you do? Like I play video games. I walk my dog to get away from it.
I research FASD.
You're whack. You're whack, dude. Well, you do honestly?
Yeah.
Honestly, well, maybe you're just born lucky.
So
Like,
so to
dude, come on. You never be like sometimes, because even I'm like, A, I'm sick of my own voice sometimes, and then B, I'm like, I don't wanna talk about FASD, man.
well,
No?
so
I'm
I
not trying to
always
push you to an answer, like, that
no,
just means
I'm just I'm just trying to figure out where to come to the answer. So I always said to my mom, because my mom is just she's that person. She's
yeah, yeah.
just
Right.
amazing. She's strong. She's the fixer of everything.
But what's your mom's name?
Susan.
Yes.
Is your mom's name Susan?
Yeah, man.
No way.
I'm not su Susan Teresa Noble, what's up?
My mom is Susan Parker.
See? My mom was adopted.
Your mom was adopted?
Yeah, my mom is indigenous. She is got her status, yeah, but I got the second generation rule, so I didn't
No.
like I grew up around Northern Ontario,
Yep.
so indigenous people were just around. I didn't know until I went to the city that that was a thing, and I was like, "What the" I have
But
buddies,
it's
hockey, it's like, I guess when you're
but
raised
that's like Wes. Like, how do you do it? Well, if you don't know any other way, then you just do it.
that's fair,
And that's the thing. And until you're subjected into something else, you don't really
but you
know
bring lots of points, though. You
what
have
exists.
community.
Yep.
You're part of Canada ASD as
Yep.
well, so you contribute that way. But I guess it comes down to if I'm not putting my energy into this, then, what are we doing? And it takes all that energy to keep your
But
kid going too, right? Because
it
as much
does.
as
But from
success he has, you're a part of that.
so I asked my mom, I'm like, what happens when all the strong people break? Because being
Yeah.
Wonder Woman,
Yes.
like I can do everything. But when I had that straw that broke the camel's back
Yeah. Chink in the
before I
armor.
left healthcare, my B12 levels dropped out and I just started feeling yucky. And I'm like, this is crazy. I can't control this. And I'm like, this is terrible. Like, I have never been in such a vulnerable position that
Mhm.
my brain and my body were not talking to each other about
Mhm.
stress. And my brain was telling me everything was great, but my body was exhibiting all of these weird things that I'm like, and then my doctor told me your brain just doesn't handle stress well. And I'm like, stop. My whole world is
Yeah,
stress.
yeah, like I live there, dude.
Like that's where I live is in that pivotal point. So I did the whole take sick time off work and talk to counseling, and I'm not downplaying any of those services and resources, but it got me again thinking, when you don't know what you need, how do you know what to ask for what you need?
That's the crux.
And that's what our kids deal with. That's what our loved ones deal with. If they don't know what to ask for, then how can they ask for it? So I'm going online, I'm going on wellnesstogethercanada.org, and I'm going on to all of these organizations and these free services and resources, and I'm talking to, like I said, counselors, and I'm taking medication, and I'm going to yoga, and I'm doing all of this stuff, and I'm feeling like crap still. And I'm like, I don't get it. And I'm still healing from all of this process. And I'm like you said on one of your caregiver success things, do you go to your car? Yeah, my car is my place. I remember when I was younger and raising Joseph, I would max out, tap out, reptile brains, all firing in every angle. I throw my hands up in the air. I'm like, I'm piecing out.
Yes,
Alan, you have to deal with him. I'm done.
you
And I
got
would
to.
go get in the car and drive down the road.
You got to, man. My respite was going to pick up tear up for work.
Yep.
Could wait because I could leave him for 45 minutes before the house smelled like weed.
Right.
That's what would happen. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I had a cap that I could go and then but it's not his fault because that's just what happened. That takes over, because we did the same thing, like, because it reeks in the house, dude, don't, because sometimes you would just forget, boom, next thing you
But
know.
it wasn't like that young fellow that I had living with me that was smoking pot. He lived with me for 3 years, Jeff, never smoked weed in my house once.
Yeah.
Never.
Yeah. With Clay, with my guy, we just
Like,
have to tell him to beat it down the road, you
but
know?
this guy here, so he wasn't smoking pot in his house. A friend of his was smoking pot outside on the back deck with the
Yeah.
door
Yeah.
open,
Yeah. 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 No, that all makes sense, man.
right? And
Oh,
that's just it. So, like, my go-to things for, like, my self-care and my mindfulness stuff, it's I have a hot tub now, which I really like.
awesome.
I try and get some easy peasy lemon squeezy romance novels that are, like, literally 12 chapters long that are easy to
Juicy, man.
read.
Yeah. Good. Good for
I
you.
just but it's
Fucking right.
not they're not big books, they're not hard to
Who
read, they're just
cares?
like, a 10-year-old could read them,
Oh,
but
yeah.
it's
But who
just
cares?
something to just tap out for
I
those
play video
moments.
games.
I scroll
Listen.
through aimlessly on Facebook. Facebook is a fidget toy for me.
Yeah.
I just aimlessly scroll.
No problem. See, because I play video games and I shoot bugs and do things, and but I have friends from middle school I still play with. Yeah, you have to check out. You
Yeah,
have to
you do.
check out sometimes because it is a 24-hour, 7-day a week, 385 days a year, but
Yep.
you do it. Now, here's my thing. What would you say to someone who's under the perception that you are, have some sort of inner organic superpower, right? Because I can't do what
I
you
do,
do.
I'm Wonder Woman. I
Yeah,
just don't have my costume on today. No.
no problem. People are under it.
So, I actually had this situation happen when I started working as an EA with this little fella. So, I studied this little fella for a month before I started working with him,
Yeah,
off the clock, because I need to be prepared. I need to be educated. And that's what I do with everything. I educate myself. I ask the what ifs. I ask all of this stuff to figure out, like, what am I dealing with? If I want to build a house, I'm not gonna go and take out $30,000 and go to the building department store and spend 350,000. I'm gonna figure out what I need and evaluate and analyze and figure out what do they have, what has worked, what hasn't worked, and figure all that stuff out. And that's what I do. But when I started working with this young fella, I said to mom, I'm like, I do not have a magic wand and I am not a magic wand. Your child will continue to be dysregulated. Your child will still have fits. Your child will still push and hit and kick and spit and bite. However, I will go in as the role of a firefighter. I will survey the scene. I will do environmental scans. I will look and see what contributing factors are. And I will try to intervene and prevent any domino effect that I can possibly do in that moment. I said, that's what I can do based on my training, my education, my experience, and that's what I can do. And I said, I'm not your typical EA. I said, I will probably bring in things for him to smash and things for him to take apart and fidget and whatever, because that's the way his brain works.
yeah, it's
And
good.
this kid, like, he got diagnosed at 3, and Jeff, honestly, he was pushing kids every day. He was hitting kids, he was spitting, everything. Like, I can go 3 days without him even putting a hand on someone now, and I can, like, peg him just like clockwork. Like, I can get him down for a nap in 5 minutes, like, just
Yeah,
pegged him right to a T. But his educator changes the classroom around and wants him to pick up the toys, and he doesn't know where do they go. So guess who has to pick up the toys?
and then it's that whole you're enabling thing,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, yeah, and they have
Or
no idea.
you're picking him up too much. Well, I'm picking him up so he doesn't body slam his kid,
Yeah, 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 like
because
I
it's like
am
I say he's like
co-regulating.
he's like the roadrunner with no brakes,
Yeah,
and that's what he's like. But I've learned if he's running like this on the playground, it's grounds for pushing, but if he's running like this, he won't.
he's just having a good time.
He's starting to learn these strategies, and he's starting to put
It's
things at 4.
Yeah, no, that's good
Like,
because you knew that, right? So
insane.
because you would have done the same thing with your boy had you known right away.
What I did to the best of my abilities,
Right,
right?
right, right.
And
That's
that's
the thing, to the best of your abilities.
Yep. It's
Right.
the research. Like, it's constantly like, take what you see and put it into Google. Kids hitting and spitting and spinning in circles. Strategies. Look
Right.
it up. Well, we've done that. No, that doesn't work. No, I'm not going to do that. Go down the list. Oh, I haven't tried this yet. Well, try it.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely, because it is hit or miss, and then some things work sometimes. You end up having a big ass toolbox, right?
Yes.
Because you're like, "This isn't working," or "This worked before, let's try this." "Oh,
Yep.
this works. Oof, thanks." We got to the next level, but also not perpetuating meltdowns even further, which slows down the acceleration of like secondary, tertiary, all those
Yep.
things. What's the future like for you, dude? Like, what are you just going to continue to tear it up? Like, what's next? An EA until you retire, or what do you want to
No.
do?
No.
Yeah, right. I can see. Well, what do you want? What's next? Where are you going?
If I had my magic wand,
Yeah.
I want an organization that does post-diagnostic implementation of recommendations.
Awesome. That is sick.
That's
So
what I
if
want.
you had that and they gave you all this and it was bullshit because, well, it was La La Land, correct. It just
Yep.
wasn't.
So I'm going to tell you who you need to talk to, where you need to go, what you need to put on this paper, and how you need to word it. And if they say no, then the Barracuda is going to come out and we're going to figure it out.
Barracuda, dude. Who gave you that? Who
The
gave you some-
Barracuda,
Yeah.
I've had a few names. The
Yeah.
nicest
Yeah.
one I can say on air.
Well, but sometimes you got to be, especially when you're on your own. So
Well,
you want an organization to do post diagnostics. So, like, say, who are our friends with the private practice?
balanced
Natalie.
psychology.
Yeah. So Katie, right? Too?
Yep.
Yeah. So Melanie,
Melanie,
Katie,
Katie.
then they
Yep.
give a diagnosis with these recommendations. Go see you.
And you know what's
That-
exciting? They actually say that. They
okay.
actually say, reach out to your Fredericton FASD support group. And I'm like, yeah,
See? So you're already there. But that's like the big goal, right? To have an
that's my big goal.
organization.
So
Do that.
I have been told that I have a very expensive hobby that I've been doing for 4 years. And in this expensive hobby that I have been doing, this entity has evolved and the need is exponential.
So you want to do this center. That is the goal. Until then, what's it like in New Brunswick? Is there any momentum? I know we just had the conference, but is it still nothing? Like,
So
well,
there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of talk. There's a lot of things going on. New Brunswick is actually more FASD informed, educated, and aware than any other province in the Maritimes right
got
now.
it.
And they're doing some big things. There was a need for family inclusiveness. So we created family activities. So once a month, we get together as a family of all the families and we just parent each other's kids. And the parents are just like, hey, this is great because
Yeah,
they
floating
don't have to be
respite.
hyper vigilant. So
Yeah.
when we were doing that before COVID and then COVID hit, and then it's like, well, how do we do this? And we essentially couldn't. And I'm the one doing it all. So I'm like, how do I do this? So I've again reached out to community resources that I have, and I finally secured a treasurer on my board of directors who has a GPA or a CPA, sorry.
Yeah.
And she finally, today, we have a registered charity number.
You do?
Just go. But we have to wait 6 months for the whole process to finalize.
Sure.
The flat
Well,
time.
we'll circle back when you're ready to rock, and
Yeah.
we can blast it that way.
So I'm going to start doing the grant applications now because we
Mhm.
have the number to reference. And we've started in January, we started doing one monthly activity. Each activity costs about $200. We provide a lunch, snacks, activities, and inclusion support for all the kids.
So you're already going for it, right?
Yep.
That's what you're doing. You're already doing it. Like
Yeah.
yeah,
I'm doing it, man. I just need to be paid to do it.
yeah. And so,
That's
but that's what you're transitioning to.
Yeah, I wanna be paid to do it, and
Yeah.
then we have just started doing parent drop-in night, and then we do the FASD awareness walk in our community. I presented in front of the accessibility committee of New Brunswick for our legislature.
Was it
I
you or the Barracuda?
uh, it was me. However, the Minister of Social Services and Health, I told them that they're doing a really crappy job, and that was fair. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, you
But,
gotta hear them plain English.
yeah, and then so we do the FASD awareness days. I go in and advocate for parents. I write support letters. I go in and I've spoke to I think 300 grade 10 students. Grade 10 age, that is what you need to record. That's who parents need to talk to because they're not all having sex yet and they're not all drinking yet, but a lot of them are.
Right.
Grade 10.
That's happening younger. Yeah.
Well, grade 10, it's like they're still kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
so you can kind of play to those senses. So I've done a couple of education presentations that I've done for some high schools. I've done some training modules for some more organizations, and I do respite care all on top of working.
Of course you do. Is it worth it?
Yes, when you see the growth that has happened, it's worth it for them. I have told my daughter, who you're going to meet soon, that I'm like, Keely, honey, I just can't do this anymore. Like, she's like, Mom, you can't stop. You have to keep doing this because
Yeah.
this is you.
Right.
And my 12-year-old says,
I know. We're
and
talking
she
about
says,
different.
and she's like, and besides, I get to do all the fun activities too that you're hosting.
Right. Right. And does Kaylee help? Like, is
Oh
she
yeah.
getting more? She's becoming more and more involved, right?
Oh yeah. Like she's our organizer. She actually asked if she could do a Facebook auction for the support group to raise money. We've done different fundraising events. We did have a grant to do a mental health and music program. So one of our young fellows with FASD likes to rap. So our grant secured us some recording equipment,
Oh,
and
nice. He's
we
laying
had
down some diss tracks, say, of
yeah,
his workers. He just
yeah,
imagine just cutting hardcore diss tracks on his worker.
diss tracks. So we opened it up to the community, and we had 4 different events with local performers, and we had jamming sessions about mental health and this and that, and we had other people with intellectual disabilities come in, and it was great. Like, I just do whatever the need is,
You clearly, and you've been
whatever.
doing it. You've been doing it. Let's put all the shameless self-promotion in one segment. So,
I look good. I mean, really good. Hey, everyone!
yeah.
Come and see what I've got. Look.
How do they reach you? Where can they find you? If they're listening to this from, that side of the country, how can they join your stuff?
So they can email Freddie FASD outlook.com, or they can go on our Facebook site, Fredericton FASD Support Group.
Okay. So facebook.com/groups
Yeah,
slash
slash our
Fredericton.
number.
Or is it the number? No, it'll be
There is a number.
Fredericton FASD group. Anyway,
Yep.
just Google that shit and then yours will come up because all the things you mentioned about community, it's so important. When
Yeah.
you commiserate and you know you're not the only one going through it, that just gives you that confidence too.
Yeah.
You're wild.
And I'm also sharing resources too. Like, Can FASD post something, we put that on there. Jeff Noble shares something, we put that on
Yeah.
there. The local community resources, we do that. Like, we plug the other communities, like other cities that are a couple hours away. Like, we just try to support because there's nothing or there's limited. So that's what we do.
Well,
And we've even done things like give medications to families and groceries
but
and
just
housewarming
randomly just
gifts.
knock on doors and say, here, take this.
No, families that I have that are
Okay.
struggling.
No, I know, I know. Just being an ass at this point. You're doing so much. It's like we'd have to keep a spreadsheet, just to
So
follow what's up. But when, sometimes it's not work too, and you like what you do, and our community is cool, like when we're at conferences, people are chill,
oh, we're
like
the best people.
well, from the CEO though to the, you hang with Audrey or Louise, like that's why I love CanFASD too. And we're like, we're all in this together.
Yep.
And your province is lucky to have you, dude. Are you going to come back on and do this when your organization is rocking and roll?
I hope so if I get invited.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I think we just like, even though we talked this long, I think we're only just getting started. You're a wealth of knowledge and your positivity. When I scroll through Facebook, like you're answering and you're encouraging people. And I just think that's awesome. Even if you've been through all this stuff, you
But you
said
have
you're
to.
able
Like,
to.
it's doom and gloom if you don't, but at the same
Yeah.
time, you can't sell cupcakes and roses either because it's not all
Yeah.
that.
Oh,
But at the
yeah.
same time, when you do what needs to be done, it just works. And that's the reality of it. You can bucket, you can say, oh, well, they're choosing this and they're whatever that happens and the butts. But at the end of the day, the butt doesn't matter. Take the butt out
Yeah. Take the
and see
butt
what your
out,
sentence is.
put in the barracuda.
Yeah.
That's your there. There's your calling card right there. Alicia, you're awesome, man. Thanks so much for doing this.
Thank you.